want to transition to the college football playoff. We had two semifinal games. Georgia's the Wild 42-41 win over Ohio State. We had Michigan and TCU and the Horned Frogs upsetting Harbaugh and the Wolverines 51-45 in the other national semifinal. Let's just say this. Both semifinals were tremendous. Both semifinals were absolutely great, captivating, truly entertaining games from start to finish. But let's start with TCU and the Horned Frogs returning to the national title game. They have a chance to capture their program's third national title. But again, the last time TCU won the national championship, 1935 and 1938. Nearly a century ago was the last time that TCU won the Natty. And now they're back in. And the interesting thing about this first semifinal is, of the two semifinals, the one that I was least surprised to see this much offense in was, surprisingly, this game, TCU and Michigan. Both of these two teams had explosive offenses. So I wasn't surprised that the score was what the score was. What was surprising was how we got there and the manner in which TCU really just took down Michigan. They were the better team from start to finish. TCU deserved to move on to the national title game. This was a Horned Frogs team that tremendously coached by Sonny Dykes, and they came in, they looked a lot more prepared in the first half and right out of the gates, which proved to be the downfall for Michigan and something the Wolverines could never fully recover from. It was 21-6 in the first half, but the Horned Frogs looked sharper out of the gates, and they beat Michigan in all aspects of the game that Michigan traditionally dominated their opponents. TCU ran all over. They ran roughshod over the Michigan Wolverines. 263 rushing yards, with primarily their backup, because their starting running back, Kendre Miller, got hurt early in the game. So Amari DeMarcado rushed for 150 yards on like 17 touches. And they still collected another 100 yards through Duggan and a complimentary of other guys that stepped up. So they ran the ball extremely well. And in the second half, which had typically been a strength of Michigan, this was a Michigan team who obviously's defense had been one of the three pillars. They were top three in scoring defense in college football. They were the number one second half defensive team in college football. They gave up 30 points. But every time Michigan executed a touchdown drive or a field goal drive, TCU immediately answered. They had an answer for Michigan every single time they scored. And again, this is a Michigan team that had one of the best defenses in the nation. Again, the best second half defense, but they were so behind in the first half that they had to deviate from their identity. We talked about identity before with the Packers and the run game. That's what Michigan typically is. Michigan has typically been a run-first team. They control the line of scrimmage. They use the ground and pound game. They're really physical up front. And this was, according to numerous outlets, the number one offensive line unit in the nation. And TCU held their own, and then some. And as much as I want to commend the valiant effort of J.J. McCarthy, and it was deserving because I thought he showed a lot of chutzpah, I thought he showed a lot of resolve, a lot of toughness, and he's going to continue to get better. And I was actually very impressed with his arm during many critical junctures of the game, but he did throw 2 pick-sixes. And it's not just throwing 2 INTs, or at least your defense has a chance to hold them to a field goal or nothing, but he gave away 12 points. He gave away 12 points. They fumbled it at the 1 after the touchdown to Wilson was overturned. They just weren't as clean. They weren't as sharp as they had been. They'd been so well coached by Harbaugh up until this game, and perhaps the month off, the huge layoff, just kind of took a little bit of the edge off of them. Because if they had played in the first half the way that they played in the second half, I think the defense probably revs up and they likely win this game. But credit to TCU for out-physicaling them, especially in that first half. They took several counter punches and jabs and delivered their own. They stood in there in the ring. They didn't flinch. And TCU has been in a lot of close games this year. And that's the one thing that we forget, is everyone was assuming that as the game got closer, the momentum seemed to be shifting and swinging in the direction of Michigan. But this is a TCU team that has been in dogfights this season. Numerous road games determined by late game field goals, determined by single possessions. A couple of overtime games in critical stages of the season for TCU. And Max Duggan and Sonny Dykes and this Horned Frogs team had proven repeatedly that they are up for the challenge. They're up for the challenge. And they got to lean on their strengths. Michigan didn't get a chance to lean on its strength, which is the run game. I know Blake Corum didn't play. David Edwards still had a pretty good game on the ground. They still rushed it for 180 yards. But the one time we had seen Michigan have to deviate from their identity all season, that was against Ohio State. J.J. McCarthy showed off his arm, but it was the defense that also stepped up in that game. They were non-existent and a complete non-factor for the majority of the game against TCU. And I just thought TCU's defense made a couple more impactful plays than Michigan's. And because of the way the game started in the first half, Michigan simply didn't have an answer. And by the time that they did, it was such an uphill battle that they ran out of reserves. But nonetheless, a tremendous, tremendous first national semifinal.